I am super excited today. We have an amazing guest, an extraordinary guest, Isabel Friend. She is a beacon of wisdom in the world of water. Isabel is not just an educator, she's a global ambassador for water. She's dedicated over 13 years to exploring this incredible element from a scientific, and we're going to get into this today, guys, spiritual, biological, and even eco-political perspective. She's the president of the American Water Trust, an advisor at the Hydration Foundation, and a faculty member at the Extreme Wellness Academy. Isabel has touched lives across 7 countries. You ask, what is her mission? It is to transform our relationship with the source of life, and that is water. From running a water laboratory in Mexico to founding a comprehensive online water store, which I will put the links of that in the show notes. I encourage everybody right now to look at her water store. It's absolutely amazing. Isabel's journey is as deep and inspiring as the water she so passionately advocates for. So I want us to get ready to immerse ourselves in a conversation that flows through health. We're going to get into your personal health, hydration, ancient wisdom, and cutting-edge water research. So welcome, Isabel Friend, to the HDL podcast. I appreciate you tremendously.
Oh, thank you so much for having me on, Alexander. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
Yes, I want to get into right off the bat, because a lot of people don't realize this, and I'm kind of going to hit it really hard with everyone, is that we are all, every single one of us, dehydrated. What does that mean? I've heard you say that. What does that mean exactly?
Yes. So the most conservative mainstream estimates say that about 75% of the population suffers from UCD or unintentional chronic dehydration. But if you speak with the clinicians who are actually studying phase angle in their lab, they say that without fail, they've never found a person who's come into their office, regardless of whether that person feels ill or well when they come in, that is well hydrated, that is perfectly well hydrated. And there are a number of reasons for this. You know, our modern mainstream Western lifestyle is basically a desert climate. You know, even if you live in a relatively lush area, the way that we spend our lives on a daily basis is consistently creating destructuring of our intracellular fluid, demineralization of our biowater, deuteration of the hydrogen in our biowater, stagnation and lack of flow between the watersheds and the hydrological cycles within our body, and these other factors that really are what hydration comes down to. In addition to just the charge of the water itself, water is the primary conductor of light frequencies, of sound frequencies, of voltage in our bodies. And in fact, the measurement that we use to determine a person's hydration, it's called the phase angle test. And it not only measures hydration, it measures your cellular voltage, your prana, your mana, your chi, your energy. Because water is what conducts your chi, your life force, most people have a dearth of chi because we have a dearth of hydration. It's a 1-to-1 ratio. Water is life, and the more hydrated you are, the more vibrant and vitalized you are. But I would say if there's one main reason why we're all so lacking in chi and hydration, it would be because most people think that hydration is a matter of how much water you drink. And that couldn't be farther from the truth.
Whenever, I study Rudolf Steiner, and he said man too consists of about 90% of water. And he said we are really all of us fish swimming in our own water.
Yes.
Whenever, and you've talked about this, I've heard you on other podcasts about us being an ocean. Can you kind of get into that in a little bit with like the minerals and what we consist of, why we're 99.95% water molecules?
Yes, absolutely. So I think most people have heard it said that we're about 60 to 70% water. And that is true volumetrically speaking. But molecularly speaking, 999.5 out of every 1,000 molecules in your body is a water molecule. Now, the health and the amount of the water in your body varies greatly depending on your age and your health. So when we're first born, when we're babies, we're nearly 100% structured water, even volumetrically speaking, about 90% highly structured water. And by the time we are elderly, we're about 50% structured water. And this isn't because we're drinking less water, but it's because aging is a process of gradually drying out. In fact, Dr. Ishihara Yumi, that's a direct quote from Dr. Ishihara Yumi, aging is just a process of drying out. And Dr. Carly Newday has said that dying of old age is essentially death by dehydration. And according to Zach Bush, Dr. Zach Bush, he's a triple board certified physician, and he says that if we could preserve hydration within the intracellular environment, our aging would slow down, if not completely reverse. So hydration is true vitality. It is true life force essence. And the more water you have on board, the more you can literally plug in your body to the source of infinite free energy in the universe. Your body water is basically like a battery. In fact, every molecule has a north pole and a south pole, just like a battery. And when they're lined up together, you have access to the source point energy of the quantum field. And we can go into more of the science and the biology around that if you'd like. But this is basically how the creator made us, is as drops of the ocean. In fact, our biowater has, that we have different watersheds within our bodies that mirror the watersheds of the earth as a whole. So every water cycle that the earth has, our body also has a version of that water cycle. And when you're talking about your blood plasma specifically, it has about the same mineral ratios as oceanic marine plasma, with the main differences just being that, your blood plasma has more protein anions and that kind of thing. But in terms of the mineral ratios, it's very oceanic in nature. So it's believed that vertebrates first left the ocean around the Cambrian period. And the only reason that our long ago ancestors were able to leave the oceans was by carrying the oceans within themselves as their own bloodstream. And even to this day, we carry the oceans within ourselves as our own bloodstream. We are literally a drop of the ocean. However, when those mineral ratios start to deviate from that oceanic composition, then we start to see states of disease and illness and chronic pain and tiredness and mood swings and all of these, relatively minimal to relatively extreme effects of dehydration begin to manifest. So one of the primary biomarkers of hydration is how much your biowater actually mimics that isotonic marine plasma that we first came from. Currently, the oceans are more hypertonic. That's why we can't drink ocean water in the way that, our ancestors would have been able to do hundreds of thousands of years ago, because the mineral ratios have changed and there's a different osmotic effect now. But primarily, we are still made of oceans. In fact, you can give somebody a blood transfusion of oceanic marine plasma, and it's actually one of the most healing, curative things in the world. They've even done studies. In fact, Rene Quinton was the man who did these studies, where he replaced a dog's entire blood volume with oceanic marine plasma. No blood, just marine plasma. And not only did the dog survive, he thrived and healed from the illnesses that he had. So it's basically nature's primary medicine. The ocean is our source. It is the mother of all life on this planet, and it contains all of the genetic information arcing back to the primordial soup. All of life arose in the oceans, and therefore the ocean contains the pattern and the principle for all continued evolution, not just the evolution that has happened up until now. And it has the capacity to create enormous genetic healing, but we've really distanced ourselves so much in so many ways from the water that we're made of and the water that we need to survive and thrive.
Do you, I know you've seen them, and those mineral, like seed mineral supplements you can put in water. Do you suggest that? Do you like any of them? Do you have I've seen some of that before, and I've never understood it or tried it.
Yeah, I really love, in particular, there's a brand called Quinton Marine Plasma, Quinton, and it comes in these glass ampules. And due to the shape of the ampule, that seawater is able to maintain its viability indefinitely, and it stays vibrant and living and really, really high quality for sure. I definitely recommend those.
Yeah, and we're going to get into your store here in a little bit, and I encourage everybody to go to it because it is holiday season, and so I want everybody to get, because once we go through exactly what's facing your dilemma with water, and you had said something not just on the spiritual aspect, but the disease aspect and what that looks like being dehydrated, and you had just mentioned that. But one of the things that you talked about and was like shocking to me was that you can be dehydrated by drinking. So everybody says drink a gallon of water a day, so people are using tap water, or they're using. One thing that you said that I thought was wild was just real quick, tell people why those filters that they use, the little plastic ones that they buy at Costco or whatever, basically what that's doing. Because this shocked. Because I had one and I threw it out after I listened to you.
Yeah, we call those the Febreze of water filters because if you look on the box, it says it removes the smell of chlorine, but it doesn't remove the actual chlorine. And in fact, Brita filters are actually created by the Clorox brand. So the same brand that makes the chlorine makes these pseudo filters that remove the smell of the chlorine. It's kind of a farce, but there are certain types. So basically those are carbon block filters. It's just a very cheap and ineffective version of carbon that it's just not that effective. But there are carbon block filters that are much more effective. They're just unfortunately also quite a bit more expensive.
So if you have the Febreze of water and you're drinking and you're just using that with tap water and you're drinking a gallon a day, you are still dehydrated.
Absolutely. I think of there as being three main types of water. If we just break it down really simply, the first type of water is unfortunately the type that most people drink. And this is water that is, yes, actively dehydrating people. So that would be something like reverse osmosis or distilled water, which is technically clean. It's had all the contaminants removed, but it's also had all of the minerals and electrolytes removed. It's also been sterilized and had the microbiome of the water removed. And it's what hydrologists refer to as an aggressive solvent because it's had everything robbed from it, everything leached from it. It's hungry and it's trying to fill itself back up again. And so for this reason, it can actually rob minerals from your body because water is the universal solvent. She seeks to be full. She's always picking up on her environment. And this is a beautiful part of her dharma in nature because she's going to pick up on the light and the sound and the mineral composition and the magnetic radiation and the Schumann resonance and everything around her. She's considered to be the sensory organ of the universe. And so she's enormously sensitive to even the most minute vibratory stimuli. And she stores all of this information within her molecular matrix so that she can be the perfect medicine for the ecosystem in which she's flowing, whether that is water that arises in a spring and then flows downstream and nourishes all of the life forms in that watershed, or whether it's the water that you're drinking that nourishes the ecosystem of your aquatic terrain. Either way, you want your water to be very well nourished, very well informed, very mature, and to have plenty to give. However, these empty waters, like reverse osmosis and distilled, they take from you. They have nothing to give, and so they're still seeking to fill themselves up, and they take more energy from your body in order to convert them into structured H3O2 than you actually receive back from the water and the hydroelectric energy that it gives to your cells. Again, it can rob minerals from your body over time. Even the WHO, which I'm not a big fan of, but they warn against reverse osmosis in the long term due to things like diuresis and heart disease. Also, I would put tap water in this category, because not only is there no molecular structure to the water, not only does it hold the vibrational and energetic imprints of a lot of trauma. It's been highly mistreated. It's been kept stagnant in holding tanks. It has been treated with so many chemicals. It's been put through, pipes and pumps and right angles and the pressurized systems that just create a lot of pressure in the water. Basically, anything we do to water, we do to ourselves. So if we're drinking highly pressurized, traumatized this water, it's creating a lot of stress and a feeling of pressure and a feeling of just making it easier for our bodies to hold on to trauma. If we're drinking water that is empty and drained and demineralized, it's going to create more of a feeling of being just empty and having nothing left to give when you drink these waters. Not to mention tap water also, depending on where you live, can contain a lot of chlorine, which is a biocide. It creates a little mini genocide of your microbiome when you drink it. And your microbiome is another big factor in your hydration, because when we drink water, we're not only drinking it to hydrate our cells, we're also drinking it to hydrate the many, many, many diverse microorganisms that we're made of. You have actually 1.3 other organisms to every one of your own cells. Just like Mother Earth, we are a very diverse ecosystem, right? You have more genetic information of other species in your body than you have your own genetic information. And just like it's important for our Earth to be as diverse and vibrant and thriving as possible, this is crucial for our own, the health of our terrain as well. So when you're drinking this chlorine in this water, it's dehydrating you because you're killing off the microorganisms that play a big factor in your absorption of water. And then also because of the fluoride that is in the water, which disrupts cell-to-cell signaling. And as we said before, the absorption of water really is an electrical process. It's a hydroelectric process. And if you have enough voltage and enough prana, then you can absorb water. And the more water you absorb, the more voltage and the more prana you have. It's a virtuous cycle in that way. But if you cut off the signals that are being transmitted at the cell membranes through something like fluoride or many other factors, EMF radiation does something similar, then you're just not able to absorb the amount of water, and water acts as a communication network in the body. So the water molecules in one part of your body just aren't able to communicate with the water molecules in another area of your body. And so that's the first type of water. It's creating a largely dehydrating long-term effect. And I'm sure, people might resonate with this and notice that there are many times that you drink water and you just don't feel hydrated. You drink water and it just goes straight through you. You just pee it straight out again, because there's a big difference between hydration and irrigation. Drinking water is just irrigation. It says nothing of how much you absorb or how much energy you receive from the water. However, hydration is about how much you absorb. And for water to be hydrating, it needs to, at minimum, be the second type of water, which would be spring water. And this is the minimum that our biology expects of us, because for many, many, many millennia, even before we were Homo sapiens, we have, all animals preferentially choose spring water above everything else. All of our ancestors preferentially chose spring water. It's the cleanest, the most vibrant, vital, living water that we could possibly drink. It has the ideal mineral ratios to weave us into the watershed of the ecosystem where we live. You feel so much more grounded and present when your bio water is intimately connected to the bio water of your own ecosystem, so much more grounded, so much more present. And there are ways, even if you don't have access to a spring, to bring any water back to that spring quality state. And we do that by mimicking the geology of a spring. Basically, as Victor Schauberger said, comprehend and copy nature. So I recommend everyone go to findaspring.com to find your local springs, harvest and forage wild water if you can. It is enormously empowering to be able to receive your life force, your liquid life force, directly from the source, directly from the earth, with no middlemen, not only for your health and biology, but for your spiritual well-being as well, and for the sense of sovereignty and empowerment that comes from making your blood from the blood of Mother Earth, and not paying corporations for your bloodstream with bottled water, or paying, governments for your bloodstream with municipal water. This is the bare minimum, right? And the steps to bring that water back to life is filter, structure, balance, and energize. And we can go deeper into those if you want. But then there's actually a third kind of water, which, rather than just satisfying thirst, which spring or spring quality water will absolutely satisfy thirst, This third type of water is the water that actively imparts life. And you find this kind of water at some of the most sacred places in the world. These waters are considered miracle healing waters. And what's beautiful is that at a lot of these spring sites, there are also places where people will often have visions of spiritual entities or deities that show up at these places. So, for example, the Lourdes Spring at Bernadette's Grotto in France, there have been sightings of the Mother Mary there, or there's a spring in Nadana, India, where there have been sightings of Hindu deities, and there's a spring in Tlacote, Mexico, where there was a sighting of Jesus. Actually, Jesus's face showed up on a TV screen that was turned off. And all of these really interesting, miraculous phenomena that happen there. Also, pilgrims will travel all across the world to drink this water and be cured of all kinds of ailments. There have been innumerable cases of people who've been cured, miracle cures from drinking these waters. And there are a few things that these waters have in common. One is that they're incredibly highly structured. Another is that they tend to be found in places where there's a lot more geomagnetism in the rock formations there. In some cases, like in the Hunza Valley water, there's a specific kind of mineral silica in that water that will actually create an enormous amount of hydrogen bonding and structural integrity and crystallinity in the water. And then also, and possibly most importantly, there's an incredibly high amount of atomic and molecular hydrogen in that water. So if we can bring our water back to spring quality state, and then add molecular hydrogen to it in a good and sustainable way. There's a lot of crappy molecular hydrogen stuff on the market. Most of it does more harm than good. But if you can get a really high quality molecular hydrogen generator that does not directly electrolyze your drinking water, then you can begin to kind of mimic some of these miracle healing springs. And it's been shown that hydrogen is one of the primary panaceas in the world. Like, it is curative for absolutely everything. There have been hundreds of studies that have been done on it at this point for over 170 different disease pathways. And the more I look into it personally, this is kind of the direction of hydration that my water researchers has been going in the past couple of years, the more I can see that, at least from my perspective, there are so many parallels between the scriptural teachings about the Holy Spirit and the places where the Spirit has moved over the waters, has moved over these sacred, living, holy waters that contain higher amounts of hydrogen. Personally, I believe that hydrogen and the Holy Spirit are one. Hydrogen is the most common element in the universe. There's a Nobel Prize winner, Dr. Albert St. Georgi, who said hydrogen is the fuel of life. Dr. Harlow Shapley said that actually hydrogen is the fuel of the entire universe. It's what the whole cosmos runs on. And when we look into the geometry of hydrogen, we can see that when you are in a state of love and connection, your brain waves actually mimic the geometry of the hydrogen atom. We can see that the geometry of the hydrogen atom, according to the work of Dan Winters, is the source of all gravity. There are many physicists who believe that dark matter and dark energy, which together form what we call dark fluid, are actually a type of ionic hydrogen, meaning over 99% of the universe is either this type of atomic or ionic hydrogen or the type of measurable physical hydrogen. Hydrogen is the first element on the periodic table. It's the first thing that arises from the ether. It's the very first thing in creation. Everything can be traced back to hydrogen. Whether we're talking about the primordial soup, hydrogen was what generated the energy for life to evolve from that. And even now, the way that your cells create energy, or ATP, is through hydrogen. Hydrogen carries such an enormous amount of energy, information, and intelligence that it acts as this master symphony conductor in your body, signaling every other molecule and immune process as to how to conduct itself. And what I find possibly most fascinating about it is that so hydrogen, if we're talking about protium hydrogen, is one proton and one electron. And when that electron dances away and does its thing, you're left with one proton. So for, an infinitesimal moment at a time. These electrons zip away and they, are dancing in and out of existence in this probability field of electron clouds. And then this singular proton that's left is actually a black hole. So a proton is in itself a singular black hole that is in direct communion with the quantum field. So it is bringing through information directly from the source of consciousness. And that's why these sacred healing waters, that's why holy water has such a higher concentration of hydrogen, because it brings through raw energy from the field. Now, every single religion and holy practice throughout history, even indigenous practices, they've had holy water practices where they recognize that water is the mediator between the human and the heavenly. We send our prayers through holy water because it's able to interact directly with the heart of God, with the heart of the quantum field. And this is largely through this capacity of hydrogen to pierce through space and time and all dimensions as this little black hole. So if you want to bring more energy into your water, you want to make it the most hydrating water it can possibly be, then you want to mimic these miracle healing springs. And after you've filtered, structured, balanced, and energized and got it to spring quality, then you can really suffuse the water with this molecular hydrogen that just takes it to the next level. The more hydrogen in your water, the more hydrating it is, and the more raw life force and chi you have on board.
That's amazing. We're going to get into it at the end of the episode. I encourage everybody to listen all the way through, because we're going to get into specifically what you can do with your water, what things that we need to purchase so that we can make sure we have, clean, safe, this increases spiritual transformation in us. So I want to ask you about, we've all seen on TikTok or Instagram, the Dr. Emoto's work, with taking water and putting music to it. We've seen that with plants and different things like that. What is something that we don't know, especially from like a spiritual perspective, of what water is receiving from us? I don't know if you understand the question or not, but I want people to understand that water is living and what that exactly means, and because you use the words like, like well water, almost like raping water. And you've used the words like genocide and stuff like that. So those words are kind of trigger words. But if you view water as this, feminine, divine being, then now we have a different conversation. So I want to take people on a kind of this more spiritual aspect of understanding what water is and why you believe it's sentient.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's so much on this. It could be a whole podcast into itself, so I'll try to be succinct with it. But, water has been called the glove on the hand of consciousness. And many ancient cultures believed it to be the sensory organ of the universe, the way that God sees and feels and hears and perceives within this 3D world. Now, there are physical forms of water and there are non-physical forms of water. Just like we have a body, mind, and spirit, water also has a body, mind, and spirit. The mind of water is the ether, which is this oceanic field of energy that is also superfluidic in nature. And in direct proportion to water's health and vitality, how structured that water is, how much, what kind, and how strong the hydrogen is within the water determines how much access she has to that sentience, to her mind, to the Akashic field with all information and memory. The Akashic field is the same as the etheric field, right? So when we're talking about that is actually an aspect of water. And you can't separate the mind and the spirit of water from the physical body of water any more than you can separate our mind and our spirit from our physical body. Now, when we're sick, when we're comatose, when we are asleep, we don't have direct access to all of our cognitive capacities and to our full sentience and our full wit because we're comatose, right? Well, that's most of the water that people come into contact with. People don't have an experience of water being vibrant and alive and intelligent and sentient because they're interacting with water that is dormant. And it really takes love and TLC and communion and speaking water's love languages and meeting her needs to nurse her back to health again. But when you do, you start to notice incredible things that, for example, one of my dear friends, Jonathan Butts, he's one of the foremost water experts and scientists in the world. And, he runs experiments in the lab where he says water absolutely has a sense of humor. Water absolutely has a personality. In fact, he started his career as a nuclear engineer. And then when he was running water through these systems to cool the nuclear plants is when he started to recognize that water had sentience and had a personality and was acting in ways that were against all scientific reason and understanding. So he switched his whole career to studying water at that point. And you find that with a number of scientists, that the moment they start looking into water, they start realizing it's far more fascinating than science gives it credit for. Like Dr. Marcel Vogel, for example, he was an IBM scientist. He was responsible for developing the liquid crystal display screen that you're watching this on right now. It's a liquid crystal. Once he started studying liquid crystals and realizing that water could be a liquid crystal, he said, "Oh my God, it's so much better than artificial intelligence. This is nature's intelligence. This is the true intelligence. This is the original intelligence. Water is the reason why any of us have intelligence, is because water is intelligent." In fact, Dr. Rustum Roy said that water is the most malleable computer. She's able to receive, store, transmit, transduce, and amplify all vibration and frequency and light and sound signals. So she's picking up on all of this all the time. She's picking up on sound signals even beyond human hearing. She's picking up on light frequencies even beyond just human sight. And she's storing all of this in her molecular matrix. And this is a large part of her dharma and her purpose on the earth is to be a conductor of frequencies. Now, Theodore Schwenk, who's one of my favorite water researchers, he did studies to show that water picks up on even the movements of the celestial bodies in the heavens. So if, Venus is trine Jupiter right now, for example, water knows that. If it's natural water, if it's, been through its natural life cycle. Now, of course, water that's completely divorced from its life cycle and is being, withheld from those vibratory influences, or is so inundated with EMFs and 5G and static, vibrational noise that it's not able to pick up on the natural frequencies as well, might not be as true in that case. But if we're talking about the dharma, the role, the purpose of water in nature as the conductor of all life force energy, she actually weaves us into the symphony of the cosmos as a whole. She translates all of the cosmic information that we need to be an integral part of this living organism that the universe as a whole is. And when water is disconnected from that information, from that aspect of universal intelligence, then we are disconnected from that aspect of universal intelligence as well, because it is our water that transmits all of that. And so there are a number of directions that we could go in with this, but I would say, it's incredibly important to recognize that water is conscious so that we can begin, or has the capacity to be highly conscious so that we can begin to awaken our water, because when water awakens, we awaken.
So I want to, this is awesome. So, people look at like archangels and they're saying they're looking for something that they can, pray to, looking for something that can heal them, that can help them, and there's all different kinds of variances with that. How would you explain to somebody the ability that water has, not just to tap into higher consciousness, but the ability that water has for healing you emotionally, helping you with your intuition? And I know you do workshops and stuff like that. I encourage everybody to look at those. But what have you seen when it comes to like emotional healing and intuition?
Absolutely. Oh, there's so much in what you just said. Okay, well, I'll start with the angelic part of what you said, and then we can go into the emotions and the intuition and these other capacities of water to be healing and restoring. So one of my favorite concepts of angels was expounded on by Rupert Sheldrake. And he wrote a book called The Physics of Angels, where he laid out all of the scriptural teachings about angels and all of the teachings in physics about photons. Mm. And that basically his conclusion was that angels are photons or photonic energy. They're beings of pure light. They're non-localized. They are where they need to be when they need to be there. You know, they're incredibly closely connected with the stars, which are, of course, putting off this photonic light radiation all the time. Each one of them has a completely different frequency of signatures that they use in their healing and in their ability to conduct God's will in this dimension. And you could say the same of light and photonic energy, and especially the work that's being done in a field called aquaphotomics right now, which is showing that all light is frequencies and information that has to be brought in and translated by the right water. So the only way light has any effect on biological beings whatsoever is because water is able to transduce light energy into biological information. Now, when you look at the physics of water, we tend to think of it just in terms of chemistry. We tend to think of it as being H2O. That's the molecular composition of water, as far as, you know, the mainstream is aware. I won't get into the ways that that's fully untrue for now, but let's just say water is H2O. Well, that's the matter that's in water. But for every 1 part matter, hydrogen and oxygen, there are 1 trillion parts photons. 1 trillion photons for every 1 H2O in every molecule of water. So water is basically liquid light, and we can enhance water's ability to conduct that light energy from the non-physical into the physical realm by doing certain water alchemy practices. Now, there are numerous prayers and scriptural teachings. The Essenes, for example, the Gnostic Essenes, spoke a lot about water as being an angel, an angelic presence. There are also Gnostic, I think they were called the Mandeans, a Gnostic sect in southern Iraq, that said that there are different kinds of water. There is living water, and then there's what they call black water. 8 parts in every 9 water in the world is black water. But then 1 part out of every 9 water in the world is what they call living water, which, as they describe it, has the capacity to mediate between this world and the world of light, what they call the world of light. Now, the beautiful news is we can, if we understand water, turn any water into the kind of water that can give us access to the world of light or the kingdom of heaven. And that, I believe, is what healing is fundamentally. It's restoring our resonance with our original pattern, our original blueprint, our original vibrational creation that God created of us in the kingdom of heaven, or what I think Rupert Sheldrake again called the morphogenic field. You could say that the morphogenic field is the Akashic records, that it is the etheric field, that it holds all the information of everything. And so it holds this pattern, this resonance of perfection. And when we here in the 3D realm fall out of resonance with that perfect vibratory pattern of our ideal, existence, that's when disease states start to develop, because our biowater is not holding that same structure. And instead, it starts to vibrate in resonance and destructure itself in asymmetry as we become more in this world and more of this world, and the disharmonious vibrations that are in it, whether those are the disharmonious vibrations of anger or fear or resentment or sadness, or the disharmonious vibrations of 5G and Wi-Fi routers and that sort of thing.
So is there sorry to interrupt you, but is there when it comes to spiritual healing achieved through water, what is the relationship that we must approach water with? Because you had mentioned it like like in a feminine energy type, and a goddess. We've seen that in ancient wisdom and stuff like that. So how do we begin a relationship with water for spiritual healing?
Mm-hmm. I love this question. And I would say that the best way, well, there are different approaches. So the Kogi tribe in Colombia has one of my favorite approaches. They are an indigenous tribe that has probably one of the most intact, well preserved, and just elaborately beautiful water cosmologies of any people on the planet. And they recognize that water holds the matrix of reality, that it is the hologram of reality, and that it encodes all worlds of reality within itself, that within every water drop you have access to all water. Each water drop contains all water because it's a hologram, right, in a way. And that whatever we do to water, we do to ourselves. Whatever we do to water becomes our fate and becomes our destiny, both personally on a microcosmic scale and collectively on a macrocosmic scale as well. And so water is the purveyor of karma. Water is, as Dr. Carly Newday said, it is the purveyor of the law of attraction. It is the purveyor of the power of manifestation. The only reason why our prayers take effect is because it's our bio water resonating with the vibration of that intention, resonating with the vibration of that prayer. And so if you interact with water as though this is a microcosm of the universe, how much love can I bring to the universe right now? What kind of world do I want to see? What kind of experience do I want to have? I was teaching a module just last night in a course I teach called the Spirit of Water, which is it's 18 hours worth of just the most esoteric teachings and all of the ancient indigenous and scriptural and spiritual teachings. And it's so much fun. I love it. And one of the women was sharing that she had an experience in the shower recently where, she has a lot of trouble loving herself sometimes, but she found that, as we've been exploring kind of the personality of water and the character of water, and we do these water divination practices that are called hydromancy, which is a type of communication with water so that she can give us answers and give us insights. And as we've been cultivating this relationship, she found herself in just this state of truly loving the water that she was bathing in. She stepped out of the shower and she felt for the first time, and I don't know how long, such self-love, just such love for herself. And it's just a perfect example of how water is the primordial mirror, the primordial reflector. What we give to her, she gives right back to us. She was able to give true love to her water, and for the first time in ages, she felt true love for herself. And this goes both ways, as I shared before. If we are traumatizing our water, our body's going to hold on to more trauma. If we are drinking water that's been depleted, we're going to feel more depleted. But we can also use this in a virtuous cycle of giving water what we need most. If you need prosperity in your life, there are ways of giving water so much abundance and making her so full and so well taken care of that you create this feeling of being incredibly full and well taken care of in your life. And so, another insight from the Kogi tribe is that we should see water as the most beautiful and the most powerful and the most loving woman in existence, that she is actually the queen of this planet. And, that means that as men, you see her as your beloved, as the marriage that you can never get out of. It's your most intimate relationship you will ever have, because water knows the vibration of every thought that you have ever had. It knows, your dreams at night that you forget as soon as you wake up in the morning. They are light that is cast through the cerebral spinal fluid of your central ventricle that is projected onto the massa intermedia on one side of the central ventricle, and then the photon receptors in your third eye are able to pick up on those light frequencies. Like your CSF is only one molecule different from seawater, and it is emitting light all the time. So water knows your dreams, even when you forget them. And what's beautiful is that water never forgets anything. So it knows who you've been in other lifetimes when you took on a body of water. It knows the texture of the inside of your blood vessels. It knows the flavor and the smell of your sweat. Only a lover would know these things about you. So it is such an intimate relationship. And mostly we just ignore water. So I would say the place to begin with cultivating a relationship with water is really just the simple acknowledgement and just humbling ourselves to listen and to perceive and to recognize what her love languages are, that she needs hygiene, she needs to eat, she needs to breathe, she needs to move, she basically has all the same fundamental needs that we do, and really caring for her, nursing her back to health, and being open to the kind of reciprocity that is possible there. Because there were these Russian researchers, I think it was Dr. Vladimir Volokov, who showed that even though she is enormously perceptive to everything in her environment, what she picks up on more than anything else, what she is most subtly sensitive to, is human emotion. So she will reflect, amplify, or even heal human emotion when it's genuinely expressed to her.
So somebody that maybe, and I know you've seen this, somebody that may be like fighting depression, we're seeing mental health issues, especially after what happened a couple of years ago. How are you seeing water heal mental health?
I love this question. So it's actually, this goes really deep. There's a lot of beautiful research on this coming out that actually dehydration is at the root of nearly all mental health issues. In fact, there is a neurologist and psychologist named Dr. Sarah Van Anroy I think she's in Colorado Springs. And she treats her patients first and foremost, before anything else, by getting them on a well-crafted rehydration protocol. And she's seen that even in cases as severe as bipolar disorder, sufficient rehydration is at least as effective and sometimes more effective than pharmaceutical medications. And so there are numerous factors when it comes to something as nuanced and heartbreaking and chronic and sometimes seemingly hopeless as depression. But we can trace so many of these factors back to the state and the quality of water within our bodies. So, for example, Dr. Freydun Batman-Gelage has a book called Obesity, Cancer, and Depression. And he traces the physiological pathways of each of those things to being downstream. Each one of them is downstream effects of different types of dehydration in the body. So, one of the factors, for example, that is spoken of more often than anything else, but which they're starting to disprove, is that, depression is just a matter of how much serotonin you have accessible at all times in your body. And they're starting to show that that's actually not the case, that it's really not a matter of serotonin at all. And that when you restore the correct balance of the cerebral spinal fluid, you can actually, your body starts to produce a more balanced range of neurochemicals. A lot of it has to do with the mineral composition and the mineral ratio of your biowater as well. And then a lot of it is the fascia too. So because your body is 99.95% water molecules, you have a lot of different watersheds in the body, a lot of different hydrological systems. Most of them are hydraulic networks. Like the fascia, for example, is 80% water and 20% protein. And it is the irrigation network that delivers hydration to each and every one of your cells. But when we're stagnant, when we're not moving, our fascia isn't moving either. And so it's not able to deliver this baptizing, merciful flow of renewing water that helps our emotions to flow, helps our energy to flow. And so energy can get stuck and stagnant in certain areas of the fascia. I think most people have probably heard the term, the body keeps the score. But it's almost more true to say that the body water keeps the score. And your fascia in particular holds all of the memories of everything you have been through in this lifetime, physical memories and emotional memories as well. And so even if there's been an emotional trauma that's happened, trauma is just something that the body stores and holds on to because you didn't have the capacity to fully process it in that moment. You didn't quite have the lubrication to let it roll off your back in that moment. And so you needed to hang on to it. Oftentimes that energy will stay stuck in dry, stagnant areas of the fascia. You'll get knotted up areas. And you can think of it as like the difference between a juicy, wet sponge or like a dry, brittle sponge. That dry, brittle sponge is going to break more easily. And there's just a chance for frequencies, for energy, for memories, for traumas to hang out in those areas. And you'll see with people who start working with Rolfing, for example, or different fascia release therapies, that once you get the fascia juicy and lubricated again, and you get that hydrating flow of body water back into those areas, people start to have these massive emotional releases, releasing stuck traumas that they didn't even know their bodies had been holding on to. And then another big aspect is lymphatic movement. And so if you're holding on to things, you're just holding on to energies or memories, or you have a tough time just letting go and being in the present moment, a lot of times that can also be stagnation of your lymphatic fluid, which is basically like your sewage network in the body. You actually have 3 times more lymph in your body than you have blood. And it's responsible for taking all the stagnant toxins out, all of the used water, all of the everything, all the refuse from your body, and recycling it and cleaning it and turning it back into flowing, living, healthy, clean water again. But most people in our modern society, mostly because of our toxic lifestyles, where we're inundated with toxins all the time that get into our biowater, and also because we're not moving very much and we're very stagnant, it's basically like we're stewing in our own sewage in a way internally. And that can create a lot of, lower vibrational states of mind and states of energy as well. Also, because our circadian rhythms are so off. So when we're exposed to the right light frequencies at the right time, that patterns our biowater. It tells our biowater, when to release cortisol, when to release melatonin to help us go to sleep. We're exposed to blue lights all the time, which is not natural for our biowater, and it throws off our sleep cycles. Now, sleep is another big part of hydration. If you're well hydrated, you're sleeping a lot better. And so, when we sleep, our brain clears out all of the glymphatic fluid as well. And that glymph needs to clear if we want to have clear thinking, if we want to have presence, and et cetera. Now, one of the most interesting studies in terms of mood and hydration that's been done showed that even just being 1% dehydrated can cause what's called cognitive storms in the brain, where it's harder to concentrate, where you're more prone to mood swings, and where it's just a kind of a low level depressive, just like more anxious and that sort of thing. Also dips in energy, like that afternoon slump that most people feel they need coffee to get through. Now, if that persists on a daily basis, what do you call a chronic cognitive storm that just never ends? Well, it could be termed as chronic anxiety or chronic depression. There's a direct correlation between dehydration and depression, and it's really something that I encourage people to look beyond just drink a gallon of water a day, and really get onto a really well-crafted hydration strategy if they're struggling with something like that.
I love that. That's amazing, and I think it's going to help a lot of people. I want to, I know we're wrapping up on time here, but I wanted to you had mentioned indigenous wisdom. Whenever we hear, and I know some religions have grabbed onto this, but whenever we hear of holy water in spiritual practices, can you share the significance of that it's just not like a Catholic thing, that, and it's been used, throughout the centuries?
Oh yeah. Every single indigenous tradition that I've looked into has some form of holy water or water blessings or ceremonial water practices or ritualistic water practices. It is as endogenous to being human as breathing is. Having a reverence for water dates all the way back. The earliest evidence that we've seen for it is actually in the Bronze Age. That was before we were Homo sapiens sapiens. We found evidence of people revering springs as being sacred places. And, I had the great honor of studying the religion of Agama Tirtha out in Bali, which is the holy water religion. It's a kind of animistic sect of Hinduism in that area. And I got to study with some water priests out there who have just the most incredible ceremonial water practices. They have different kinds of holy water. Each different kind of holy water has so many different uses and so many different protocols. And there's, all of it. It's fascinating, but I haven't found a single practice that doesn't involve it in some way. We tend to think of, like you said, Catholicism having holy water. And of course there's the Christian practice of baptism, but there's also the Melukat practice of Hinduism. There's the mikvah practice of Judaism. There is tarpana also in Hinduism. There's, in Islam, you don't even go into a mosque until you've washed yourself, because it's water that really cleanses us, not only physically, but spiritually as well. And baptism isn't something that just happens once in our lives. It's something we have the opportunity to recreate for ourselves as often as possible. When I was studying Agama Tirtha, we would do Melukat rituals, several times a month. You can even go and do it every day if you want. If you're really struggling to get through something, just let that water take it from you. Let it wash you clean. And holy water is something that we can each create. Water, as I said, is so minutely sensitive, and she becomes the physical form, the physical manifestation of the vibrations that she's been exposed to. And she amplifies those, and she transduces them into biological information. So really praying with your water, recognizing that water is the mediator between the human and the heavenly, that it's this point of communication between the human and the divine, and that in all of these religions and all of these ancient practices, although they're all very different and they use different terminologies and they have different ceremonies, if you could draw just one theme throughout all of them that they all agree on, it is this capacity of water to be almost the telephone between us and God. And that the more our bio water resonates with true prayer, the more it reaches the heart of God. And the more we use holy water as a vessel of prayer, the more it becomes this tool of amplifying and embodying and delivering those prayers. And so, you can work with it in many ways, not only for your drinking water, but there are a lot of ancient pagan practices around water witchcraft as well that have very creative ways of making and then using, what we might call holy water, or they call it blessed waters or wished waters. That's wished with a T, and creating elixirs and potions out of them. And you can, make it into a spray and then spray your home with it, or you can cook with that water and then bless everyone in your family who is eating the food that is made from that water. Or you can put it in a diffuser and be breathing in that holy water all the time. There's so many different ways of using holy water. Of course, bathing in it. If you put a little bit of holy water into a whole bathtub, then, all of the rest of the water in that bathtub responds to the coherence of that holy water. And so I really just encourage people to get creative with it and implement it into your spiritual practice. I actually have several workbooks available. One is on water witchcraft. One is on the scriptural teachings of water in religions. One is on the ancient indigenous teachings of water and its role in mythos and in creation stories and its role in creating life. So each of them is like a 28-day workbook on how to really implement these practices and these teachings and integrate them into your practices. So
that's
could
cool.
be a fun place
and
to
we'll
start.
have the link of that so that they can make sure that they get those, because I think that's awesome. I want to, before we go, Isabel, I like to do like a lightning round with the questions that I wrote down while you were talking.
Okay.
So if we could do like 30 seconds, a minute per each one, if that's cool. And then we could go right through them. So my first one was, what is structured water?
Structured water is, think of it like alphabet soup, right? So the molecules of water are like the alphabet. And when water is bulk and unstructured, it's like alphabet soup, and the molecules are bouncing around and random and jumbled, and they can't communicate any information. But when you align them in the right way, just like the alphabet, they can conduct an enormous amount of information. All of the sonnets of Shakespeare, everything that's ever been written down is just a combination of 26 letters, and literally all of the information in the universe can be contained within this combination of hydrogen and oxygen.
That's awesome. Another one I wanted to ask you is drinking water where you travel. How do you do that, and what does that do to you when you drink a water in a certain area?
hmm Well, I would say that, if you're drinking the water from that area where you're traveling to, that's ideal because, then that really grounds you into the place that you're visiting. But most of the time when we travel, we're still drinking bottled water from Fiji or the Alps or Evian, France or wherever. And that still creates kind of a dispersion of energy. But there are absolutely portable water alchemy tools that you can get that will help to filter, structure, balance, and energize your water even when you're on the road.
Why do people use like blue glass or charge it by the moon and all those different things? Is there any significance to that or not really? What would you say about that?
Absolutely. So they are some of the many tools that you can keep in your arsenal of water alchemy tools and practices. And those two in particular, so the blue glass helps the water keep its structure. If it's already structured, it'll help the water maintain its structure much, much, much longer. And then charging in the moonlight is, again, we talked about the importance of water being exposed to certain light frequencies. Water has a very unique relationship to the moon. She becomes more energized in the moonlight. She has increased carrying capacity in the moonlight, and it just energizes the water in a really beautiful way.
That's awesome. And then what about the medicines? Because basically and you've talked about this before, we're in a closed loop and people are peeing and then we're redoing the water. So basically you're drinking other people's pee. A lot of people don't understand that with tap water. What is the deal with the medicines that's in the tap water?
Yeah, with
Like
that,
prescription drugs.
Exactly. Yeah, I hear you. And I would say that it's important to understand that water, because we are made of water and because water is life, water can be our greatest medicine or it can be our most toxic poison. And when you're drinking tap water, it is absolutely, unfortunately, a toxic poison. It is part of, one of the silent weapons for quiet wars that's out there, if you're familiar with that phrase. And in most major cities, because there's a toilet to tap system or a closed loop system, there are over 70 pharmaceuticals that are found in most of those major, everything from birth control to SSRIs to pain meds. And it's just creating a really toxic soup in our bodies when we drink that. These have not all been tested at some subclinical doses altogether. We don't know the downstream effects, and we can see that the mental health and the physical health crisis is really rising in those areas. But on the other side of that, there's so many kinds of water that can be pure medicine. Molecular hydrogen enriched water, deuterium depleted water, double helix water, magnetized water. There's just innumerable different kinds of water that honestly are nature's best medicine, and they are the antidote to the downstream effects of drinking this poisonous water over the long term.
And then I wanted to get into alcohol eating bad. So you're dehydrated and then you're drinking alcohol or you're eating fast foods and stuff like that. What does that do? Or if you're trying to drink water, but you still are hanging on to, fast food or alcohol.
Yeah, that just dehydrates you even further. They say that for every glass of alcohol that you drink, you should drink 1.5 times that amount of water. And I would say, as long as it's high quality water, electrolyte rich water, that's absolutely true. So in one of the workbooks and one of the courses that I have this kind of a formula for calculating how much water you actually need to drink based on these different factors of, are you taking a diuretic pharmaceutical that's dehydrating you, or are you drinking water? Are you drinking alcohol? Are you drinking coffee? Are you spending time in heaters and air conditioners? So you just factor that into your overall hydration strategy.
That's awesome. And then lastly, what are some hydration focused items, or what should a consumer start doing if they want to go in this direction? And I know you have an online store, an extensive online store with all these products, but like practically, if somebody like right now wants to start, cleaning up their water, what are some of the steps that they could do?
Well, the number one thing I recommend, again, is see if you have a spring in your area. Go to findaspring.com and see if you can forage wild water, because that's going to be the highest quality and it's free. And then if you don't have access to that, you again want to bring water back to the spring quality state. So you want to do each of these steps. And if you go to waterislife.shop, then you'll find each of the categories of the shop is broken down to each of these steps. You can make sure that you get at least one tool for each of them. And some of the tools overlap, like some of the structurers also energize, or, vice versa. So filter, structure, balance, and energize your water. But there's only one tool that actually does all of those steps. I was so excited when I found it because I've been teaching these steps for years. And then it was only like 2 years ago that I found this, and I was like, wait, is this as awesome as it seems like it is? And so it's my favorite thing in terms of just like a one-stop shop that literally recreates the geology of a spring underneath your sink. And it's based on the geology of the spring in Lourdes, France. So it does create that enormously therapeutic water that is highly suffused with molecular hydrogen, but it's not a machine. It doesn't use electricity. It just recreates the geology of a natural spring. And that's called the Spring Aqua Wet 7. Which again is at waterislife.shop. So if somebody just wants like the most convenient, do it all for me, I don't want to think about it solution, I would say that's the one. But there is a lot to be said for taking these steps manually so that you can cultivate that relationship, and you can really take the time to be present with the water while you're taking the steps.
I love that. And I just want to thank you for taking the time and educating. I know that's your life's mission and purpose, is to give the wisdom of water to the world, Isabel. But you truly are a global ambassador for water, and you can see the amount of study and all the lab work that you've done. It's just incredible, and I appreciate. You always have people that are either like scientific or either spiritual, But to bridge that gap, that's to truly. You see like Rudolf Steiner, and you mentioned Victor, Schauberger. Those are amazing people that we can study because they've done both. And I feel like you're doing the same thing. And so I just appreciate you and want to encourage you to continue this path, because this is needed. Like, it woke my eyes up to, I didn't even know my filtration system I have now is sucking minerals out of my body, so I thought I was drinking clean water. So I got to go through all these processes, but I appreciate you and appreciate your mission and what you're accomplishing. And I know it's going to be a huge impact with the world.
Oh, thank you so much, Alexander. I really appreciate that reflection. And thank you so much for having me on. I hope that your listeners have gotten a lot of value out of it. And I know they get a lot of value out of all the amazing content that you're bringing forward. And you're creating such a beautiful space for wisdom to really shine and ripple out into the world. So thank you for all that you do as well. And it's been really a joy chatting with you.
Thank you.